What's good, everybody? This is Dario Hunt from Live Life Fearless, and I'm back on here. It has been a minute. For those of you that have subscribed to the channel because of some of my reactions, you have probably noticed that I haven't had a new reaction in quite a few weeks now, and that is just because I just quite honestly don't have the time for it. It is really hard to kind of dedicate to do those on a regular basis when I'm juggling so many other things. So I am starting this new series here, hopefully do it once a week, where we kind of do a shorter roundup of all the latest music that I've been listening to and some of the music that has just come out. Kind of have an informal discussion and talk about it and kind of my general opinions and thoughts about it. But with all that being said, let's hop right into it. And if you are enjoying this video in this new format, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you are really enjoying it, don't be afraid to smash that like, subscribe button for us, as that helps us out greatly. Sophomore efforts can be tricky, particularly for artists that are following up a debut project that was as well received as Khalid's first one was, so I was a bit hesitant to see exactly which direction he would go with this one. But with that EP that he dropped at the end of last year, he did alleviate a lot of my worries heading into it, because I really felt like that showed he had a strong grasp on his sound. And particularly on the sophomore project, I really think he showed a great deal of maturity and growth from that first project. Obviously, he is no longer kind of a teenager, so he's not dealing with those same sort of issues and subject matter, but he is a much more mature and kind of rural tribal person, and that really shows in his music here. It's much more steeped in sort of traditional R&B, and a lot of the songs are extremely sultry in its nature, something that you didn't really get from him before. And I think one of his biggest strengths here is that he has been able to blend the more pop side of him and the more R&B direction he is going with to create, its kind of own unique type of style and sound. And I think he does a good job of juggling the more radio-ready singles and the more kind of serious album cuts. Now at 17 tracks, it is far from a home run. Things do drag on a bit, and he doesn't necessarily nail it on each and every song. And not each and every song is the most original. Actually, in whole, the whole album isn't the most original, but it is still extremely well done. For me, this is definitely one of their more fully realized projects here, from front to back. And much like Khalid, for me, it's not necessarily a complete home run. They don't knock it out of the park each and every time, and there are a few moments that feel a bit and they do play things a bit safe, and not all the songs and sounds are the most original, but as a whole, it is just an extremely enjoyable listen. So while some of the songs I may have felt like I've kind of heard some type of variation from other artists out there before, just the energy that they bring and just the way they fully commit to their songs really resonate and make you want to sing along with them, even though it is not the most original. And they've always kind of been a sort of eccentric band, and they continue that here with the varying styles and sounds throughout the project. But as a whole, they really bring it together, and there is sort of an underlying kind of eerie, darker tone to the songs and sounds here, and I really wish they kind of would have explored that even more fully, but it does add a nice little touch to it and separates them from a lot of the other acts out there. Martians is back yet again with another project, and if you are unfamiliar with Martians, all you need to know that he is the drummer for The Internet and a large part of that kind of brain trust behind their sound. This is his second sort of solo offering, and much like his first one, this is where he gets to be far more experimental than he is with The Internet, and I think it pays off extremely well for him, because some of the concepts of the sounds that he puts together here are far more fascinating and interesting than what we get typically from The Internet. Being as this is kind of his more experimental type of project, not all the songs feel the most fully fleshed out. They feel a bit more conceptual in nature, but he does a really good job of playing with that, and that kind of playful, lighthearted nature really adds a lot to the overall tone of the project. It's funky, it's soulful, it's out there, and it's just fucking good music. They're not a group that I am the most familiar with, but I've definitely heard the name over the years. But I've heard a lot about this album over the past couple of weeks, so I decided to give it a listen for myself. And I'm glad I did, because it's phenomenal. In general, their sound here is definitely in some of that more hard electronic rave type of sound, but they do a really good job of blending different genres and styles as a whole. And each and every track feels unique, but somehow cohesive. There are a few kind of more slowed down atmospheric moments here, but for the most part, this album is full of just bangers. And that can get boring on a lot of other albums, but the way that they managed to blend those more club type of sounds with elements like atmospheric type of elements and tinges of psychedelia really make it interesting throughout and really kept me engaged and never feeling like anything was getting too stale. This was honestly one of the best electronic albums I have heard in quite some time, and I highly, highly suggest that you guys check it out for yourselves. I just think that Smoke DZA is an incredibly underrated rapper, and I think over the last few years, he's really started to find his stride in his sound and his style, and he's delivered some extremely satisfying projects because of it. And while he doesn't really change things up at all for this one here, he just kind of continues to build on that very solid base that he has built over the last few years, and Bacon, Eggs, and Trees is just another really solid project. The production is phenomenal, and he continues to step up the bars. The more I listen to him, the more I really start to enjoy and appreciate what he brings to the table. It's laid back, quasi soulful, and coming in at only 7 tracks, there really is no reason for you not to give it a listen. I know, Electronica, the guy who spends more time talking about music than actually making fucking music, or at least dropping and releasing music. Yes, the one and only, and I'm right there with you. I've given up on him a long time ago. But it's really hard to resist kind of checking out anything, say, new or unreleased, which in this case, all his verses were unreleased, kind of from him, because there is a reason that people were so high on him in the first place, and that is because he's got bars and he can really rap his ass off, and he showed a lot of potential, and that's why kind of people are still holding out hope, even though I am not. But I just couldn't resist checking this one out. And like I said, this is not anything new from him. These are all unreleased acapella verses, all compiled by, I believe, Altered Crate is the label that put this project together. It's all unreleased verses from him and kind of rare or lesser known instrumental production from Nujabes. And I didn't know who Nujabes was, so I really kind of had to go dig in and do some research, and found out that he was a Japanese hip-hop producer who unfortunately passed away in 2010. And it's really unfortunate that I kind of just discovered him, because his production is fucking phenomenal. It is a mix between sort of hip-hop and jazz, and the soundscapes that he creates here match perfectly with Electronica's style and sound and kind of delivery. So much so that you almost feels like he specifically produced these songs for him. And if you've ever watched the anime Cowboy Bebop, some of it will kind of sound a bit familiar in style, because he was one of the top producers for Samurai Champloo, which was made by the same people who made that show. And there's definitely that sort of jazz underline to everything he does. But it's just some beautiful, beautiful music. And if you're a fan of hip-hop, true hip-hop, you should definitely check this one out, regardless of how you feel about Electronica. And you're probably thinking to yourself, Anderson .Paak, didn't he just drop a project not that long ago? Yes, he did. And it was not well received at all from either side of the aisle of his fans. And fair or unfair, he has definitely seemed to take notice, because he said he is kind of going to go right back in and go back towards this sort of that sign of soulful sound, soulful funky sound that kind of brought him to the forefront in the first place. And while for the most part the songs here are well done and the album as a whole is generally good, it never really seems to elevate itself above just being good, which is a problem that I think he continually finds himself in. And I think it's because he wears his influences so clearly on his sleeves and on his chest and just everywhere, that although the songs are good, they come off feeling more like lesser imitations than wholly original productions and songs from him. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just nothing that makes me want to go back and revisit his stuff over and over again. And to me, despite all of his immense talent, which he definitely has, he continually plays himself into this lane where he is not quite great, but he's not bad either. And he doesn't really evoke any strong emotions or feelings from his music. And for me, as a creator and a musician, that is probably the absolute worst place to be in. But I keep on holding out hope, like a lot of people, that he will somehow figure it out and figure out his musical identity, because he is extremely talented and has a ton of potential. And I think I've seen him do it before, because some of his joint projects with Knowledge, as No Worries, were some of his best stuff, and stuff that I repeatedly found myself wanting to return to and dig deeper into. But on his kind of studio projects, he has yet to kind of figure it out. And while Ventura is far from a bad album, it is far from a great album as well. It is just one that it will come and go, like a lot of his recent stuff has. I've never been the biggest fan of them, but they have always put out some interesting music and some interesting concepts. And this one is definitely out there in terms of, kind of the psychedelic nature of it, and the atmospheric sounds that they kind of put together is very instrumental heavy. And while I enjoy psychedelic rock, psychedelic music in general, it is a very fine line for me between psychedelic stuff that is good and interesting and stuff that is kind of cheesy. And often I've found it kind of towing that line and crossing over to that kind of corny for the sake of just being different on King's Mouth. But that's not to say there is not a lot of interesting things here, because there are a lot of interesting things that they do here. And there's some very, very well done atmospheric instrumentals here that are worth checking out, despite some of the corniness that they kind of implement here, particularly with the story kind of through line of it all, the childlike storybook through line of it all. But once you kind of get past all of that, there is a lot of interesting things to kind of chew on and listen to, and I think it is still worth a listen. ScHoolboy Q is probably one of my favorite artists, hip-hop artists out there today, and definitely my second favorite out of TDE. I think that he always kind of subverts expectations and delivers stuff that you weren't necessarily expecting, but you're glad that he kind of went with in the first place. Particularly on Blank Face, which might be my favorite Q album to date. But on Crash Talk, I have some very mixed feelings about it. Now, full admission, I am a fan, and I don't really think he has put out anything outright bad music-wise. I just think it's always been varying degrees of good and great. And I think a lot of the stuff on Crash Talk is definitely on the lower end scale of good. Blank Face was definitely a dense album for him, and one that was very heavy on kind of concepts and kind of storylines and storytelling. Whereas this one feels almost in the exact opposite direction. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but it probably was. But I don't really think it created the most engaging or memorable project because of that. Nothing really feels cohesive here. It kind of feels like a bunch of singles, and you can kind of tell just by looking at the track listing and some of the features that he employs. He kind of goes for a more upbeat, energetic type of production compared to his last project. And while there were some enjoyable moments here, it's just not anything that felt impactful or long lasting like it did on some of his previous stuff. You won't get anything here like on that kind of Eddie Kane record that we did on last one, where he gives a full like 5 minutes of story and dense content driven music, even with some switch up in production. Everything here is just kind of in that 2 minute, 2.5 minute range, and it comes and goes. And once it's gone, you don't really think about it, and you don't really feel any sort of type of way about what he is saying or talking about, except for on a few songs like on Black Folk. But those moments are few and far in between here. And I just think for the most part, it kind of just came and went. And I was a bit disappointed considering we waited 2.5 years for that. But it is definitely still worth a listen. It's just probably the weakest Q album we've gotten so far. Even I have to admit that for the better part of this decade, he just really hasn't had it, and it really felt like he's kind of lost his way in some of the sound and the reason why people became such huge fans of him in the first place. It's a well-known narrative among, sort of his listeners and fans, and one that I'm sure he even realizes, because on Fly Times Volume 1, The Good Fly Young, which he released on 420, of course, he kind of tries to head back in sort of that more cushion, OJ, funky, soulful, experimental type of sound and production, particularly on opening moments, and even using Cardo, which you don't really get to hear him use so much in terms of production. But he also still tries to kind of throw in some of those more trap, club, ready type of sounds and songs. And he tries to juggle both aspects of his music here. But I think he ends up kind of failing miserably on both fronts. And while there are some okay moments here and opening kind of moments of that project, I think overall, if I never really heard this again or heard it in the first place, I don't think I'd be missing much, and I don't think you'd be missing much either. This is definitely a hard pass. Now this one I will probably get some flack for, but Bun B and Statik Selektah's TrillStatik is a hard pass for me. And not because I don't like Bun B, I fucking love Bun B. And it's not that I don't like Statik Selektah. I like Statik Selektah generally, and I really appreciate everything that he has done for hip hop in terms of production over, the many, many years he's been active. But I do not like them two together. You know what I've never once thought when I've been listening to Bun B? Man, I really wish he was rapping on a grimy East Coast NY boom bap type of beat. Now, I could be in the minority there, but I doubt it. Now, I'm not saying that he doesn't do his thing here because it's Bun B. Of course, he does his thing here. And I'm not necessarily saying that the production is bad here. I'm not that huge of a fan of Statik Selektah, but if you enjoy his production, you'll probably enjoy it here too. What I'm saying is that the two together sounds extremely off and is not what I want to hear when I hear Bun B at all. Now, I appreciate some of the collaborations that they're able to get here with some of, some classic type of NY rappers and kind of get some sparring back and forth between the two. But I would have appreciated it even more if Statik Selektah decided to somewhat get out of his lane and somewhat get out of his comfort level and kind of create some more country rap influenced type of production. Not all the way, but at least kind of incorporate the two strengths that they have together. But no, instead we get Bun B just rapping over Statik Selektah beat. And maybe a song that's cool, but for a whole album, that is not what I'm listening for. This ain't it, Chief. And that's going to be a hard pass for me. But that's it for this week's sort of roundup of albums that I've been listening to. Let me know in comments down below if you agree or disagree with some of my thoughts and opinions and points to some of the projects that I talked about. Let me know what you are currently listening to, and if I missed anything, if there's anything that I should definitely be checking out. And if you're liking this new format that I'm kind of testing out, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know by smashing that like and subscribe button for me. And if you're liking and rocking these videos like this or this, You can also head over to the site and grab some for yourself. I will be back hopefully next week with another sort of roundup of album talk. So check back shortly. But until then, I will catch you guys soon. Peace.